And today a jury decided guilty. No insanity, no excuse, just plain guilty. 10 times over. Boulder King Soopers shooter is going to spend every minute of every day of the rest of his life in prison. He got 10 life sentences and another 1,300 years beyond that. As you just heard, the survivors and the victims' families waited 3.5 long years for that. There was no question all along that the killer was Ahmad Alissa. Jurors rejected his defense team's claim that he was insane at the time due to schizophrenia. The case has been stalled for years as doctors ruled that he was not competent to stand trial. But after years of delays, the case went from verdict to sentencing in just minutes. And from the moment that we heard that first guilty verdict read on a count of murder, we knew there was going to be life for him. Judge sentenced him to 10 consecutive life sentences without parole and another 1,300 years for attempted murder and weapons charges. The judge acknowledged in court that there's no real blueprint for the judicial system to respond to mass shootings, but perhaps there should be.
When I signed up to be a judge, they had no instruction for us in this type of a case. And thankfully so, because one would wish that you wouldn't need instruction on how to do a sentencing in this type of case. But unfortunately, that day has come that we need to start training judges on how you address so many victims of such a horrendous crime.
Before the sentencing, the judge heard directly from the families of the 10 people killed in the shooting, a chance for them to speak publicly about what their families lost and to speak directly to what the killer did and did not do, both on that day and in the year since.
It bothered me when the defense attorney said there are no words when describing the pain and suffering. There are words, so many words to choose from, words that span language barriers. How about, I'm sorry? If we've never been denying he did it, then where's an apology? An iota of remorse from the defendant or his family would have gone a long way.
That was Erica Mahoney, who you heard from a moment ago outside the courthouse. She spoke in remembrance of her father, Kevin, who she has long described as being love and light personified. The neighborhood dad, the Meals on Wheels volunteer. The Mahoney family spoken about the presence of love and light even in the worst moments, like when people rushed in to help others survive that shooting. Minutes ago, we heard Erica Mahoney say that she has been looking for that light in the years since she lost her dad, and that she has found it in the people, in the community, in the city of Boulder. Kevin Vaughn has been there each day of this trial, has gotten to know those families, and Kevin, I think oftentimes we're at a loss for words, but it's important to take the cues from the folks closest to this about what they say they want and need from our community and what they say that they have received, which is unequivocal love for years.
That's right, Kyle. There were a lot of little moments today, in addition to the time that some of these victims' families and some of the survivors spent talking. When the judge was reading the guilty verdicts and she read guilty on count 10, the death of police officer Eric Talley, his father was sitting just in front of me and he slowly bowed his head and family members leaned in with him. And to see Bob Olds, who has been tireless in keeping the stories of his niece Ricky alive these last 3.5 years, dabbing at tears after the guilty verdict in her murder was read. And the last person that really made me think about what these people want and need in terms of hope for the future was an officer named Pam Gignac. She's a veteran of more than 40 years in law enforcement. She was the first officer at the scene. She was with Officer Talley when he was killed. And when it got to reading the verdict for attempted murder on her life, she sat very stoically, but the officer next to her reached over and slowly patted her on the knee in a gesture of comfort. And once it was all over, once this 3.5-hour hearing was over, there were a lot of hugs and some tears and a feeling that finally a lot of these people can take a step forward.
So I tried to get off my fear hat and said, get on my Nana hat and said, "Hi, honey." And I hear this scream, "Nana, Daddy's dead." It cut my life in half. I couldn't even be a good Nana at that moment. I was just Eric's mom.
Kyle, that was just one of many, many emotional statements made in court today by survivors of those who died, and in some cases, people that were in the store and were shot out and barely got out alive.
You know, Kevin, there were the years of delays that dealt with the killer's competency, right? Could he understand what was going on in this trial? Before then, at trial, once that issue was overcome, it was the question of whether or not he was insane on that day. You were there. You heard the defense arguments. Did they ever have a compelling case that he truly was insane by the legal definition, or was it fairly open and shut and the jury came back fast?
Kyle, I talked to an attorney last week who's been following the trial, not involved in it, and he said to me, no jury is going to conclude this defendant was insane if his own lawyers haven't put on a witness to testify that he was insane. They called a lot of family members and some experts to say that he had schizophrenia, that he was seriously mentally ill, but none of them did a sanity evaluation on them, and they did not have an expert who testified at trial that he was insane on the day of this crime. So the jury was out, I think by our count, about 5.5 hours if you count when they started on Friday. That's pretty quick when you've got 55 criminal charges and another 38 sentencing enhancers.
That is striking. They asked the jury to reach a conclusion that they did not have an expert to support, and the jury did not. Guilty was the verdict. Kevin Vaughn, thank you for your work over the last couple of weeks.